2026 isn't just another year for F1. Verstappen is calling it Formula E.
Like Formula E on steroids.
And Oscar is sounding the warning on starting procedures.
Oh, nearly!
This is how the 2026 regulations will change Formula 1 forever. Formula 1 fans are used to regulation changes, but in 2026 we didn't just get a rule change. We got a complete overhaul of the sport as we knew it. For decades, Formula 1 was about who goes the fastest, who is willing to take the most risks, and the team who built the best car. But now the man on pole might be decided by who's doing the best Lyco during the lap. So what exactly has changed? The headline is the powertrain, and this is where the full reset begins. During the turbo hybrid era, the internal combustion engine used to generate about 830 to 850 horsepower. On the other hand, the battery added another 160 horsepower to bring the total output to around 1,000 horsepower. One of the first changes for 2026 is the new split in power generation. Instead of an 85-15 split, we now have a proper 50-50 split. The internal combustion engine generates roughly 550 horsepower, while the battery adds another 475 horsepower to bring the car close to that 1000 HP mark. But how did the FIA achieve this? Well, they stripped the car of the MGUH, or heat recovery system, which sat on the turbocharger. It was one of the most efficient pieces of machinery in F1 history, creating an infinite energy loop. As long as the exhaust was hot and the turbo was spinning, the battery was charging. But it was expensive, complicated, and scared away newer teams like Audi, so the FIA killed it. This means the newer cars are now fully dependent on kinetic energy recovery, or MGUK for short, which generates energy once the driver slams on the brakes before a corner. But what's keeping engineers like Adrian Newey awake at night is just how much energy this system can recover during a lap from just braking when the driver is pushing flat out. Even during testing, we could see the cars have massive power, but this only lasts for short bursts, and many drivers like Alonso have stated that they need to lift and coast during certain corners to save energy, or the car will be too slow on the straights.
To make a fast lap, you need to distribute the energy on the straights to go fast, and on the corners you don't want to waste energy.
But that's just one of the changes. The other big overhaul is active aero. The FIA calls this the new X mode and Z mode. Basically, Z mode is the high downforce mode, which the cars need during corners, while X mode is for low drag on straights. It's similar to DRS, with specific sections of the track being designated for activation, but instead of just the rear wing, the front wing is changed as well, and it's actually satisfying as hell watching the front wing move mid-lap. With a further reduction of the wing sizes, it also reduces dirty air, which should help cars follow more closely and supposedly lead to more overtaking opportunities. But just like DRS, if the X mode fails to close during the braking phase, a driver will be left with zero grip going into a corner. To further assist in overtaking, the FIA has introduced manual override mode, or MUM for short, which has since been changed for obvious reasons.
Lando Verstappen will be inside your mum within 2 laps. Box, 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 box.
The drivers can activate this when they are within 1 second of the car ahead. Drivers can use this all at once to make an overtake or strategically during a lap, but the real benefit comes from extra battery power the chasing car can deploy, allowing it to use full battery for longer or roughly 6 to 7% more energy deployment on the following lap. In simple terms, the car behind will have more advantage to make an overtake, leaving the lead car defenseless. Now, you'd think with all these additional features, the car will be bigger and heavier, but the FIA has actually reduced the minimum weight limit from 798 kgs to 768 kgs for the 2026 season. The chassis has been narrowed significantly by about 100 millimeters, while the wheelbase has been shortened by 200 millimeters. The idea is to make the cars nimbler and more responsive to allow for better racing, but it's the feeling of the car that's so much different that's creating the ultimate culture shock for both the drivers and the fans. Let me show you how much the sport has changed from the days of legends like Schumacher and Senna. F1 can be broken down into 3 distinct eras. The pre-hybrid era, which ended in 2013, the hybrid era, which ran from 2014 to 2025, and now the new era is dominated by battery power. During the glory days of the V12s, V10s, and V8s, the philosophy of the sport was simple: push it until it blows up.
And it's flame! Oh, and Mansell's off! Mansell's engine has well and truly blown in the biggest possible way.
There was refueling, which meant cars were sprinting from stop to stop or strategizing around whether to go for a low or heavy fuel load. But the true beauty of it all was the screaming engines. The only problem was the alarming rate at which these beasts were gulping up the fuel loads. And as for the on-track racing, it was all about bravery. Who is willing to keep their foot on the gas the longest? Or who has the biggest balls to overtake on the outside of 130R at almost 200 miles per hour?
Tried to block the line into 130R, and Alonso having none of it, straight around the outside, and now Raikkonen.
Fuel saving was barely a concept unless you were in trouble, and drivers focused on reaction and tyre degradation for the most part. Reliability was the currency of champions. If your engine survived the abuse, you had a shot. Every driver dreamt of going as fast as they possibly could every single lap. Then came 2014, and the start of the new turbo hybrid era. It was the first shock, and Seb, coming off 4 world titles, was one of the first to sound the alarm.
Yeah, you'll have to get on top of, you'll have to adapt. It's a new car, it will feel differently, so of course, if you drive it the way you drive it last year in the race, for example, you won't see the checkered flag. So
this new era introduced batteries, reducing engine power from 100% to just 80 to 85%, and the other 15% now relied on the battery. Drivers had to learn to manage energy usage, and we began hearing radio messages telling drivers to go into harvest mode. But when it came to qualifying, drivers could push flat out to completely drain the battery before doing a cooldown lap to recharge.
Hamilton now. Can England snatch something back in Australia? Yes, they can! By 0.3 of a second.
The Honey Badger made this work.
And Massa's getting swallowed up by the pack, and down the inside goes Daniel Ricciardo. What a move from the Australian! He's picked up a couple of places.
Still braking as late as he possibly could to make the overtake. In fact, many drivers used this to gain that extra 1/10 of a second around a corner. And in principle, the driver with the fastest car won the race.
Lewis Hamilton winning the British Grand Prix at Silverstone.
Now we have changes so complex, they will change driving styles. With the combustion engine safety net now being pulled, the battery is now the boss. With it producing 50% of all power, it means that when it runs out, the driver loses up to 40 kilometers per hour of race pace. Regardless of how fast they are, the machinery simply doesn't want to work the way it should. During Bahrain testing, we noticed this frustration from Max already. While you usually upshift on straights to gain more speed, the Dutchman downshifted at full speed. Oof. Not to brake, but to rev the engine high enough to force the MG UK to recharge the battery. Just think about this, the fastest cars on the planet going down a straight in 7th gear instead of 8th. Revving the nuts off the engine just to generate electricity. And this creates a trickle-down effect that ruins the art of cornering. Best overtakes have historically happened in the corners.
Sebastian Vettel on the inside does manage to get past.
On Kimi Raikkonen down the inside.
Schumacher's having none of it. They're side by side. Don't collide.
And if a driver brakes a few seconds later than the other guy, he makes the overtake. In 2026, this might now be impossible. Why? Because braking later means you shorten the braking zone, and if you shorten it, you recover less energy. It basically means you have less power on the exits. We could have a situation where the late braker dies, and the early braker is the new hero. And this is what Lewis meant when he said the fastest qualifier might be the one who lifts and coasts the best during a lap. He suggested that a qualifying lap, usually a full throttle affair, might require at least 600 meters of lifting and coasting. That is over half a kilometer of not being full throttle during a fast lap. That fundamentally changes the racing line. Currently, you sacrifice the entry to get a good exit. You widen the track, you clip the apex, you power out. In 2026, sacrificing the entry for exit doesn't matter if you don't have the electrical deployment to use that exit speed. The driving style becomes about squaring off corners, driving deep, turning sharply, and getting the car straight as soon as possible to minimize tire scrub and maximize regen time. It essentially gamifies the sport and becomes eerily similar to Formula E. But I've also got to mention their aerodynamic war, which might be dead in the water. Teams spend hundreds of millions on wind tunnels and downforce, but if the regulations force everyone to corner at the same speed to save energy for the straight, why does aero still matter? The FIA is inadvertently prescribing the ideal corner speed for each track based on battery limitations, capping the ceiling of performance not with drag, but with energy starvation. We're entering an era where the cockpit shifts from a place of instinct to a place of calculation. Even the steering wheels have undergone a revolution to make space for all these new features. Drivers used to manage brake balance and diff entry. Now the primary target is megajoule per lap. We could see a situation where the performance swings wildly during the season, not because of a new front wing or underfloor, but a software update that manages energy performance 1 or 5% better. F1 is moving from hardware to software, almost like a new iPhone being released every year. Unfortunately, the comparisons to Formula E are inevitable, with even Max Verstappen calling it Formula E on steroids. Formula E is fantastic for what it is, a city street racing event which focuses focuses on energy management. But F1 is supposed to be the pinnacle where speed and power are the most important elements. If F1 becomes Formula E, purist tracks like Silverstone and Suzuka will expose the lack of pace. Instead of making a tenth or two when going through 130R, drivers will lift and coast to save energy for the upcoming straight. But could this perhaps lead to better racing, even if we don't get the sounds and the speed? It is the entertainment that matters, right? When the 2014 regulation changes were announced, everyone said the cars would be too slow and sound terrible. They did sound terrible. But the cars eventually became the fastest in history. Same thing in 2022 when they said the cars would be like driving trucks. Everyone adapted.
Leclerc has that inside line. Through goes Hamilton. Unbelievable stuff.
Some teams have been complaining about the engine regulations because they might be behind the curve. Meanwhile, we know Toto has been downplaying the issues because Mercedes have a strong electrical division. What I can tell you for sure is that the definition of a good driver is changing. Instead of reflexes and bravery, it's now about strategic calculation and processing power. Future champions won't be the ones with the heaviest right foot, but the ones with the coolest heads and the best energy management strategies. The one positive is that with less dirty air, there will be more on-track battles and the lead might change more frequently. More entertainment at the cost of raw speed. But it's the natural evolution of motorsport, and with political pressure on the sport to reach net zero, it was expected. For now, we just gotta wait and see to find out whether these changes at least lead to better on-track racing and more entertainment. And talking about entertainment, make sure to check out this video next. And let me know who you think the smartest driver on the grid is. And as always, thank you for watching.